Welcome to Dead Headspace. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined not always, I almost said always. Today we are unfortunately not going to be with Brennan. He'll be back next week. We have Erica Robin. Say hello, Erica.
Hello.
And we're joined by returning guest host, Candace Nola. Say hello, Candace.
Hello, Candace.
And today we're joined by the lovely author of The Drift, and that's out now. Not now of the recording date, now of the release date of this episode. CJ Tudor, say hello, CJ.
Hello.
And for video, oh, wrong one. It's a mirror. It's the opposite. So yeah, we got you right there. And
I can see.
Victor Laval, next week's guest on that side.
Excellent.
Let's just dive into it. What got you into horror?
I think a lot of people, definitely a lot of people, I probably started reading horror. I was about 11, 12. And probably Stephen King and James Herbert. I mean, this was the 80s. So horror was like really big in the 80s. You know, it was such a thing. It was everywhere. And so, yeah, I remember picking up like Christine from the library and kind of going, yeah, I mean, this is what I want to read. This is what I want to write. And I read all the James Herbert stuff and Clive Barker and Dean Koontz. But I mean, even before then, I was, you know, even when I was younger, I was really into like ghost stories and creepy stories. I think most kids are quite macabre, aren't they? And I was really into reading sort of, you know, that kind of creepy stuff. And like I used to get like the Hamlin Book of Horror and Hamlin Book of True Ghost Stories, and those big anthologies and things you used to get, even though I used to get terrible nightmares. But I used to really like reading creepy, dark stuff. But you know, if you asked me why, I probably couldn't even tell you now. It just really appealed to me, even though it used to scare the hell out of me. There was something about it I kept going back to. But it's really weird. My daughter now, she's 9.5, and she's the same. She's just really into like stuff that scares her. I don't know. Maybe it's that forbidden thing with children, isn't it? You're drawn to the things that scare you, that you shouldn't watch and you shouldn't see.
Sure.
So, yeah.
And I just got one more question pertaining to that, and then Candace or Erica jump in. So have you noticed anything from the time when you were a kid to now, with seeing through your daughter's eyes? Are you noticing cultural differences in how stories are told? Or I can imagine now it's kind of integrated, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I've never been to your side of the pond before. Is there any cultural differences that sticks out to you? And it doesn't even have to be through prose. Maybe it's oral storytelling or some other form I'm not even thinking of.
I don't know. I think, you know, some scares and fears are universal. It's interesting because when I was growing up, I say horror was really big in the 80s. So you had, coming from the 70s, you had big films like Halloween and so on. And then it was Stephen King. And it was a really big genre in movies and books. And you had a lot of classic horror films around at that time. And then it kind of fell out of fashion, I think, for a while. It became a little bit of I think in publishing, I like a little bit of a dirty word. It wasn't as fashionable anymore, but I think there's been a real resurgence. I think, you know, certainly for like kids and younger people, she says something really old because I'm 51 now, like things like Stranger Things has like opened it up to like kind of a whole new generation. But I think movies and TV and stuff were a little bit ahead of publishing, because I think horror has continued to be popular in films. It never really went away. And I don't say about cultural differences. I think people like the same kind of scares, but I think we're much more savvy about it now. I don't think you get away so much with unless you're being quite self-aware about it, with the young woman in hot pants running away into the dark woods and everyone going, no, don't do that. Don't open the door. I think horror's become more intellectual in a way. I think we are much more sort of aware of the things that we're expecting, some of the scares. So I think when you're writing horror and horror in films has become more sophisticated in many ways. You know, we still get scared by the same things, but I think filmmakers and I think writers are more self-aware about horror. I think that's a cultural change as well. But I think, a lot of the basics are still there. I find it interesting watching the stuff that, my daughter who's 9.5 is slowly getting into, because some of it is very similar to me. Like she loved things like the Addams Family, which I used to watch as a kid, which is that kind of like slightly creepy, dark, macabre, but funny with it kind of stuff. And then sort of easing her way into sort of other things now. She's now saying to me stuff that she watches is like, oh, someone said this was scary, but it's really not. It's not scary. And I'm like, okay, we need to move you to the next level now then,
That's great. Candace.
Yes, sir.
Or Erica.
Well, Erica.
Oh no, we don't have Brennan on today. When Pat does that, Brennan's usually like, no, pick one.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll go.
Look, I don't want to hog the air, but if you guys want to.
I just don't want to cut anyone off, but I have questions prepared. So,
Listen, unless it's the guest, you can cut me or Brennan off. Not Erica, though. That's not nice. She's too sweet.
Okay. Well, Eric and I are both going to cut you off from time to time. So
do it. You should.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, CJ.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about how you got your start, let's start with some of those questions there. So in order to advance that a little bit, who do you think was the most influential author that you read that really made a light bulb just sort of click and you were like, this is what I want to write like, or this is really what I want to do? Was there any one or just like the whole blend of the mix?
I had about 3 stages, I think, with writing. Like when I was a young kid, I used to read a lot of ghost stories and stuff. But then I think also, I was quite a precocious reader. So at 8 or 9, I was like reading Agatha Christie, which got me into mysteries and plotting, I think. And then I think about 11, 12, I discovered Stephen King, as a lot of authors do, which was a huge influence. And at the same time, I used to read a lot of James Herbert too. So those were 2 huge influences in my teens. Yeah. Interestingly, I then really got into an author called Michael Marshall Smith, who's, I was thinking he was called less horror. I think probably started off more being slightly more sort of sci-fi, but has written a lot of kind of genre mashup stuff. But he was a really huge influence as well, because I loved his style of mashing up genres, and mixing in putting a lot of things into the mix. And also I loved his kind of like he has a great way of writing, which talks a lot about human emotions within his context of really dark, mashed up sort of science horror, thriller, mystery, slightly sci-fi. I think he's a great writer with a lot of dark humor too. So he was also a huge influence. So I think there were sort of like 3 stages of influence really with my writing. Every one of those sort of authors, I remember reading and thinking, wow, I really love what they're doing here. I love their writing and I want to do something like this. But like I think a lot of writers, it takes you a while to kind of find your own voice a bit. I mean, my first book, The Chalk Man, was really my homage to Stephen King, and also all the stuff I grew up loving in the 80s, like everything about 80s horror and 80s kind of culture and all that stuff. And it was just I wanted to kind of write that kind of thing, but kind of set in the UK. And that's kind of The Chalk Man for me was all about, in a way, putting all those influences that I had into one book. But I think most authors, you have someone who's kind of, you have lots of writing heroes in a way, and you have different writers that inspire you, I think, at different times of your life. You read different things at different times, and it all goes into the mix.
Yeah. Nice.
I could definitely see Agatha Christie in The Drift for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's like probably the most
in a really
prevalent.
Weird, messed up way.
Like I felt that even when before we even talked to you, like, yeah, it's definitely noticeable there. Well, we'll talk about The Drift soon, but Erica, is there anything that you want to talk about with what Candace was just bringing up, or is there any new question that you want to ask?
Yeah, I think kind of related. Did I unmute myself? Yes. Okay, good. Kind of related to what Candace was talking about. You've got like quite the selection of books that you've written so far. I was going to try to show them for the video listeners, but I'm probably going to drop them. But a lovely stack of your books.
Erica, can you hold that up one more time? I want to get a screenshot of that.
Hey, let's
Sorry,
see.
my computer's not as fast as. It's still not loading. Okay, I'll just tell you when.
I'll just awkwardly hold them while
Just
It's still loading. There we go. Okay, so
you even
three,
see the
no one has to say cheese, but I'm just gonna say 3, 2, 1. Okay, good. Thanks for playing along.
Yep.
That is quite the collection.
Yes, and 4 of them are hardcovers, 2 are paperback. So I'm absolutely obsessed. Since I read The Chalk Man, you have been like an auto-buy author for me every time you have a book coming out. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I actually have The Drift pre-ordered from a bookstore, but I got an ARC, so I have 2 of those. So one will go to a little free library.
Excellent.
Yeah, but my question from all of that was, if there's a reader that hasn't read any of your work yet, do you have a book that you would typically recommend that they start with?
Oh, crumbs. I mean, I suppose I always say, because it's kind of the first book, The Chalk Man, because it's still really close to my heart. It's the first book that was published, and I think it gives a good flavor of what I love in a way. But I'd also say, kind of like, to people, read The Drift as well, because it's so very different. They're kind of like 2 extremes of writing, really. I think, I wrote The Chalk Man, I wanted to kind of like write in a way with all my influences at the top of my mind and get all kind of that out there. And I think as I've gone on, like a lot of writers do, I've kind of like hopefully found my own direction and voice as well. And every book, I think, is different and hopefully a progression, because I never wanted to be someone who did the same thing again and again. I don't want to be one of those authors that kind of churns out the same book with kind of different characters, essentially, but it's kind of the same thing. But I think everyone gets to a stage as well, don't they, that they want to write something. So I'd always say, read The Chalk, maybe read The Chalk Man, then read The Drift, and then fill in between, which would be quite interesting to do. But then also, I think, even though they're not like a series, they're all standalones, maybe read them in order, because I do like reading authors' books in order, because I find it interesting to see where they go, where they start and where they sort of, end up, because I think it's quite interesting to do that as well. But I like to hope that each book kind of has my voice, but is different as well, if that makes sense. Because I had to do sort of, I wouldn't say a battle, but I know when I first presented The Drift to my agent, and certainly my UK editor, they were a bit, this is a little bit different from your previous books, in that way that kind of, editors and agents are, they're a bit like, people have quite liked these. This is a little bit different. But I was really passionate about it. And I think, you always want to do something a bit different. You want to keep sort of pushing in different directions. So it was a real passion project to write The Drift, really. So, I'm pleased that, people generally seem to have really enjoyed it and liked it, which is really good as well.
Unrelated to that, did you say "oh crumbs"? Because I've never heard that expression before.
Well, oh crumbs.
Yeah.
Oh, is this a UK thing?
Okay, I'm slow. What does that mean exactly? Is it like a multi-purpose phrase?
Yeah, like kind of like, oh, blimey, or is that UK phrase as well? Like if someone sort of says, oh, I can't think of like a good US equivalent to that, really. Like, oh, I suppose, oh God, oh, blimey or crikey, we might say sometimes.
I got you.
In the UK. Yeah, but yeah, crumbs. It's a very British thing, I think, actually.
Because I'm just getting some like fairy tale folklorish images in my head when you were saying that, and I don't know. I just like it. It's fun. I have British friends. I have never heard them say that. They've used a lot of other non-American terms that I hear from them often.
I think crumbs and crikey are phrases that should be used more.
Yeah, happy for that. So let's talk about The Drift, because it's interesting. I want to jump to your afterword, where just bullet points here. You talk about how when you started writing it, and you're probably going to be asked this or have been asked this a lot, but you wrote about, in similar situation with Paul Tremblay with oh my goodness, Swan. It's not Swan Song.
Survivor Song?
Survivor Song, that's it.
Yeah.
Survivor Song, Chuck Wendig, how he wrote apocalyptic books before 2020 which was Wanderers. So we've heard from them about what it was like to experience kind of living in your world.
Yeah.
Wherever you want to start, just take it away with when you started writing it and what it was like to kind of live through this.
It's really weird because, I mean, the original idea for The Drift I had back in 2019. And I mean, to very briefly sort of summarize, but it didn't start from the idea of kind of like apocalyptic. It started from the idea of what would be the sort of tightest locked room mystery I could write. And I was sort of thinking this, I think I've had a conversation with someone about it. And I thought about the idea that of someone being trapped in a cable car, suspended thousands of feet in the air, with a group of strangers and a dead body. And that seemed like quite a fun thing to do. And then that expanded, obviously a fun thing to do, and then that expanded out into kind of maybe having 3 scenarios. So within The Drift, we have, someone stranded in a cable car with a group of strangers and a dead body. There's a crashed coach, which another of our protagonists is stuck in with, survivors and dead bodies, and they're stuck and they can't escape. And there's another protagonist who's in this isolated sort of ski chalet, and the power is failing, and again, trapped for different reasons. And it started off as this idea of kind of 3 locked room mysteries that are somehow connected in this kind of isolated, snowy location in a snowstorm. But then I started thinking about, why would these people be trapped? Why is no rescue coming? What's making their situation unique? What's outside of their situation that is also scary, that makes this, even more terrifying? And I started thinking about a kind of a sort of a near future kind of sort of post-apocalyptic kind of situation, where society has kind of crumbled and there's been this viral pandemic. And this was back in, I think, probably about summer, autumn 2019, I first had the idea, and I floated it to my agent. And for various reasons, I was sort of contracted to write another book that I'd already pitched. And because this one was slightly different, the conversation was, well, maybe put that to one side. It could be the next one along, keep it on the back burner and write this one first. Because they're a little bit nervous about it, because it was a bit different from previous books. And so I was like, okay, yeah, fine. I don't really want to write this, but yeah, okay. And then for other reasons, then I started writing the other book. And then, of course, 2020 happened, and we had COVID, and everything kind of went haywire for everybody, And I was writing this book through the pandemic, and the book I was writing, I started to really struggle with. And I thought I was ticking along fine, actually, but I was really struggling with the book. I didn't seem to have my mojo. I didn't seem to have the voice. And then I lost my dad as well. And it became sort of doubly hard. And I think this book that I was writing became kind of wound up with all the horrible stuff we were going through at the time, and losing my dad and everything else. And eventually I sent the book to my editors, and they came back with a lot of notes. And I just said, I can't fix this book. I don't like this book. I hate this book. I don't want to go back to it. I don't want to publish it. I want to scrap it because it's not what I want to write. I'm not happy with it. I don't want to put out something that's subpar. But I really love this other idea, The Drift. And they were very generous and supported me. In the meantime, we put out the short story collection as well, which kind of sort of filled a gap and I wanted to do anyway. But The Drift I was still passionate about. But then it became, I suppose, slightly a risk as well, because the backdrop was this viral pandemic, which we'd all just gone through. But at the same point, I think it really helped inform the story, because when I had the idea, COVID hadn't happened. And when I came to write the book, it had. And in a way, it was quite cathartic to write it as a kind of, I say to a lot of people, it's not about that. It's almost like a parallel world where, if the very darkest things that happened, they happened in The Drift. But it also is very much a backdrop to the main story. It's kind of a precursor to where our characters find themselves. It explains where they are and why they are. So it isn't so much about the pandemic. It's more about seeing where these people are after this bad stuff has happened, and how they cope with it afterwards. But it was a little bit nerve-wracking to some extent, putting it out there, because it was like, is it too soon? Do people want to read about anything with this kind of theme in it? But I do say to a lot of people, it's not about what happened kind of in reality. A lot of my books exist in a kind of parallel reality, and this was a kind of a parallel reality, maybe examining where stuff could have gone in a way, but it's hopefully maybe set far enough away from that you can read it without feeling it's too close to home. But it is informed by some of the things that happened. And I think if you know, COVID hadn't happened and we hadn't had that pandemic, I wouldn't have examined some of the issues that I do within the book. So it does inform it, obviously. It's always a tricky one, I think, because, you know, you do think, do people want to read anything that, you know, they never want to read about anything to do with viruses or pandemics ever again. But at the same point, it does sort of give a starting off point to talk about a lot of stuff, I think, as well, within fiction.
Sure. Candace, heads up, I'm gonna go to you and then Erica. I heard a lot of that in the beginning of the pandemic, that there isn't going to be any interest in, or that there isn't going to be interest in related fiction stories. But I don't know. I just kind of look at throughout history. I love history, and you think of the darkest times, and that's when the craziest art or inspirations come out. And a lot of times it's the reflection. Like, think about the 60s with Vietnam and all the civil rights movement. And I don't know what was going on in the UK for the most part, but in America with the civil rights movement, the hippie movement, and a lot of kick-ass. Like, I love rock and roll, and a lot of music was my favorite band's Led Zeppelin. A lot of them, one of my other favorite bands is The Who. So I really love bands from your area. But a lot of them were against the war, and they would sing about it. And it's still awesome music today. It's powerful stuff. But my point is I never felt that way, because I like being in other people's heads. And how am I going to know what other people are thinking if I don't ask? But I'd like to read about it, so that's kind of my 2 cents there. Candace.
Patrick. So my question now actually comes from your co-host. Brennan would like to know, how hard was it to keep the multiple timeline straight as you wrote it, with the coach and the retreat and the cable car? And so how hard was that?
That was probably the hardest part, actually. I wrote them all separately because it's essentially 3 separate stories that come together. So I wrote them as 3 separate stories because that seemed the easiest thing to do, because then each one has its own story arc. It has its beginning, it has its middle, it has its end, which means that each story maintains tension and interest because you invest in it as a story on its own. And then I knitted all the chapters together, which then was the hardest part, probably, because again, then each chapter must flow to the next, and the timelines have to work together, and there's lots of little details that all have to add up. So there was a lot of editing. So that was tricky. But I knew when I first had the idea that it was going to be, in many ways, an absolute nightmare to write and knit together. But then that was a challenge. There was a lot of things about the book that were challenging, but that's what made it interesting. I mean, some of the main reveals and twists, again, I knew would be really, it's one of those things where I remember saying to my editor, I think there's lots of challenges with this book, but I think it'd be so much fun if I can pull it off. I think a lot of writers look for that kind of challenge to write a book that's that does present problems, and it's difficult and it's intricate, and I loved that about it. We did have 3 proofreaders go through it because I was like, I didn't want there to be any plot holes, and that was my biggest nightmare. And there were so many little details that had to tie up, because it does feel like essentially we're writing 3 novellas that all had their own intricacies and plot things that had to work, and then they all had to work together as well. So it was brain exploding time, a lot of it, but it was a lot of fun because I really enjoy that part of writing. I love the characterization, I love creating the characters, but I do love the kind of the jigsaw puzzle aspect of a thriller and a mystery, of putting it all together and making it hang together. Something immensely satisfying, I think, about hopefully making it all hang together and come to a satisfying conclusion. because there's something immensely satisfying as a reader when you read a thriller or a mystery or a horror book, and you see all the plot threads and the story come together, and you hopefully have that moment when you go, oh God, and I love that as a reader. So that's what I kind of hope to deliver as a writer as well. Lots of other moments along the way. I don't think a book should ever be geared towards one big moment. Sometimes there should be lots of moments where you're like, or tense or sad or oh my God, I didn't believe that, or I didn't see that. So there should be lots of those moments throughout a book, really.
So I have one more to go along with that, since you briefly touched on it. So which one of the timelines was your personal favorite to write, if you had to choose?
Each was my favorite when I wrote it. I did love writing Carter's. I actually wrote Carter's timeline first, and which kind of set the tone for the rest of the book in a way, because as I knew it was a departure from previous books. I think I got to quite early on. I got to a certain scene in that section, which was relatively sort of it set the tone. I think I wrote this particular scene and went, okay, so that's where we're going with this book, and we're definitely stepping into more horror here, and this is where we are with it, and that kind of set the tone, I think, for the book. Then I knew exactly where we were going with it, so I really enjoyed writing that. But I enjoyed writing all of them because they all had their interesting parts. I liked the claustrophobic aspect of Hannah and Meg's situation, being trapped in the coach, trapped in the cable car. The cable car was obviously the initial idea that set it all off as well. So I really enjoyed writing that, because there's a certain challenge in writing something that's so small and tight. You've got like 5 characters. There's nowhere for them to go unless it's out. So you've got it to keep that interest and tension and things happening within that. Makes that quite a challenge, because you can't cut to another scene. You can't move away from them. You can, because you're between different characters. When you're writing that as it's standalone, you've got to keep the interest and the tension going. So they were all interesting to write for different reasons. The coach I really enjoyed so I enjoyed all of them. But they all presented. I enjoyed all of them for their different challenges in a way, and they were all sort of great fun to write, because each character and each scenario presented different things as a writer as well. So they were all really enjoyable to write. But as I wrote the Carter section first, I think particularly that I won't sort of give anything away, but there's a scene quite early on though, and I liked the fact that made me go, right, I know where I'm going with this book. And from then on in, I kind of went all holds barred. I wrote it, I think I said to a couple of people, as if I wasn't under contract, as if nobody had any expectations from me. And I deliberately wrote it like that, knowing that, I could then deliver it to my publishers and they might just go, what the hell is this? Oh, they might love it. Unfortunately, they loved it. So
nice. Erica, ma'am.
Yeah, so I have so many questions stemming from that one. But I think where I'm going to take it is still related to the drift. You mentioned that it was kind of like I'm not going to be able to pronounce that word. In my head.
I know I always have problems with it.
Yes, cathartic. There we go. Thank you. I have to hear it. If I picture how it's spelled in my head, I panic and I'm like, I can't do it. But you mentioned that about the drift. And when I was reading Meg's timeline, I was just sitting there like thinking of you writing that as a mother. Did you have a hard time with that? Like, did you have to keep yourself from spiraling too mumuch into the darkness, or was that also kind of therapeutic for you?
It was really personal. That was because I think you put yourself in her position, and it's quite dark, isn't it? Because I have said, I have a daughter who's 9.5, and she's our only child, and she is my absolute world. And should something happen to her, the darkest thing is you sometimes think, well, I'm not sure I'd want to. I love my husband dearly, but I'm not sure I would want to. It'd be really hard to carry on, particularly if you have no other children. I think, because suddenly you're not a parent anymore, are you? What are you? There's that question: what are you if you you have a child and you lose your child and they're your only child? And it's a horrific thing to think about. It is my greatest fear, I suppose. For any parent, losing a child is your greatest fear. And I'm not trying to say it's worse if they're an only child, but I think it makes it harder to continue. I have a friend who tragically, did lose a daughter, and she has 3 other children. And she said quite honestly, when we had once chatted about it, and I said, I think I'd find it much harder to go on because Betty's our only child. And she said, yes, you would, because she carried on for her other children. So, Meg's situation is that she's lost, her daughter in horrible circumstances and doesn't want to carry on. She basically, her stall is at the start of it that she wants to die. She's tried to die. She's tried to kill herself. She doesn't want to carry on. There's nothing she wants to live for. She just wants to be with her daughter. And really, she goes into the situation of the book. She's only there because she thinks, she's basically setting herself up to die because she thinks she might as well die this way than any other way. And so she's a tough character, but she's kind of this sort of tragic character. Then bizarrely, gradually through the situation she's in, she kind of finds something she in a way wants to live for. But it's a strange balance between survival and kind of wanting to die for her. So she was a very interesting character to write, and kind of close to my own heart, because I constantly kept thinking about how I'd be in that situation, which is the darkest, most awful situation you would be in. And so I did find a lot of resonance with Meg, and I did love writing her, and I liked writing all of the characters, because not that I'm saying I don't really write characters as a part of me or anything like that. She was perhaps one of the closest, but I think it allows you to examine different parts of your psyche in different ways. You're in a way putting yourselves in their heads and thinking, how would I deal with this, and justifying how they would do certain things as well, which is interesting. But yeah, I got quite sad about certain bits with Meg, I have to say. But then that's good. I think if you make yourself sad while writing stuff, sometimes that's a good thing. It hopefully means it's feeling genuine and real. So yeah.
You almost made me cry. Because like you, I currently only have one child too, and I love my wife. She's my best friend, but not comparing one to the other. Like you, it's hard to word this, but if I lost my son, I don't know. It'd be a lot harder to not go back to drinking.
Yeah.
Without my son, I don't want to say that, without my wife. I'm just gonna leave it without my son. It's so hard. I don't know how to word it, CJ.
Oh, it's different. I've said to Neil, once sort of joking, I said, you do know I would push you in front of a bus to save Betty, and I hope you do the same to me.
I hope my wife would do that to me too.
That's what they mean. I'm like, and you better say you would do the same, because yeah, it's that kind of, your child is kind of everything, and it's a different love. It's kind of like this raw thing, it's very hard to explain. And yeah, that they are kind of your everything. And it's weird, you don't realize that until you have a child. So that's why I think Meg was, and also I'm 51 as well. There's I will never have another child. And it's not like you would replace a child even, but it's that they're so precious. So yeah, there's that terror when everyone says, "What are you most afraid of?" It's like, well, that's the thing I'm most afraid of. Obviously, that's why we live in this. I think whenever you love someone so fiercely, you live in a state of denial, don't you? You can't bear to think of anything, the terrible thing happening, and the terrible thing does happen, and you just always hope that the terrible thing never happens to you. I guess that's where we live our lives a lot of the time, don't we?
Absolutely. One more thing, and then Erica, please jump in. Unless I cut you off, Candace. Did I cut you off? No. Okay. Philip, my 3-year-old, he's fast, and I was chasing him, and I thought I was close enough, and he just darted left in Walmart, and I couldn't find him for a few minutes.
Oh, the horror, the terror.
And all that all that ran through my head was some sick fuck is going to take my,
Yeah,
because that's all you see nowadays, you know, and
it is. You see terror and danger everywhere. To the point where
Yeah.
you have to kind of live in denial about it. Otherwise, you would just never let them. You'd like keep them in a room just because I can keep them safe here. You know? But you have to let them. Go out and do that. Then as she gets older, you know, my daughter, the more I realize that as well. You know, so you have to kind of go. You want them to go out and have their independence and stuff, but at the same point, you just want to keep them tight and just protect them from everything.
There was this nice couple that they saw my face and they just were like, "Is he yours?" I'm like, "Yes, thank you, thank you." But my wife and I also watch a lot of true crime, and we say, "Phil, you're not going outside ever." We obviously, you know, we want him to experience everything, but yeah, I'm with you. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I know Candace has probably experienced that quite a lot because she's got older kids. So I see that look in your eyes.
It gets worse as they get older as well, because then you have no control, you know. And I think what I was like in my sort of late teens, early 20s, and I think, oh my God, my parents must have just constantly worried.
Erica,
please jump in.
Yeah, so that was actually the tail end of my question, but I have another one semi-related to that. Obviously, we were just speaking about one of your biggest fears, but based on the drift and some of your other story content, I got to ask if being trapped or any type of claustrophobia is also a fear of yours.
But you know what? I am quite claustrophobic, and I'm also really scared of heights. So yeah, the idea of being trapped in a cable car is probably one of my worst nightmares. But I am quite claustrophobic as well. So the idea of being trapped somewhere, is kind of terrifying. I'm not great on crowds and also and people being trapped with people. But I think other people also, I think, are kind of my worst nightmare in some ways as well. Because I am sociable, but I also a huge introvert as well. So the idea of being trapped somewhere high and small with people, strangers, people, is kind of a nightmare. But
that was such a cool setup, though.
It just seemed like a fun. Sometimes you have these ideas. It seems like fun. You know, the cable car to me seemed like such a fun idea, but it wasn't sustainable on its own. I don't think for a book. For me, you know, there had to be so many other elements, which is why it's spread out into sort of other stuff too.
But something that you address also is you have extreme temperature. Eventually, you got to do something with your body because you got to pee and poop and eat.
Oh yeah.
And on top of that, you got wolves, and it's a far height, like you said. And the thing that you kept going back to, I forget which character said it. You can't. You said it's like a half mile. I'm making up the distance. But yeah, you what are you supposed to do? You can't like bear grip it. There's no way. It's too cold. It's gonna slice your fingers, and then you're gonna break your legs, and the wolves are gonna eat you. Have you seen Frozen? Not the Disney one, the Adam Green movie Frozen from 2010.
No.
That's what it reminded me of. Have you
You gotta watch it.
Oh, I should watch that.
That's what it reminded me of, and thank you for reminding me of that. It's a great movie.
Oh, I should watch that.
It's so good. It's very realistic. And if you weren't afraid of cable cars stopping, that movie will do it for you.
Yeah.
But it is, isn't it? I think in fiction, you always want to put your characters in extreme situations. In some ways, you know, most fiction, most crime fiction and mysteries are a character being trapped somehow, somewhere, whether sort of literally or metaphorically, you know, you're putting them in an extreme situation where they have limited options, which is where, you know, you create your tension, obviously.
Isolation. Yeah. When I started writing, that was a big point that was made by a lot of writers. Isolation is huge, especially in short stories. I know we're not talking about that, but Erica, do you have more questions, or was there more to that?
Not about the drift, but you mentioned short stories, so we can definitely jump there unless Candace has more drift questions.
Not specifically. So
I'm sure we could always go back. I mean, this was an amazing book, so I'm sure we could talk about that for hours anyway.
Of course.
But let me hold it up. Sliver of Darkness.
It's
Was your
such
first
a, I
publication?
love that
Yeah,
cover.
I have that one.
I do love that cover as well.
Is that before Erica asks? Because I gotta ask. This is there like a UK version and an American version. I really don't. I've never asked this to an author. I don't. Is it that there's two different publishers? I really should probably know that answer at this point, but I don't. When there's
Well,
different covers. For the
yeah, I
same
mean,
book?
I still don't really know.
Okay.
No, I think basically, I've always been told it's that, they're different markets. So different things appeal and different booksellers want different things depending on where they're going to put the book in their bookstores. And yeah, that's how we end up with different covers. I mean, I find it really interesting. And I presume there's probably a lot of marketing and research goes into this sort of thing of what appeals to this kind of market in the UK as opposed to this market in the US, and where bookshops might put this in the UK as opposed to in the US. And actually, I'm published in quite a few other different countries as well. And it's always quite interesting to see whether some tend to use perhaps the UK or the US cover. They often come up with their own covers, and they're often all very different. And it's always interesting to see. And I guess it must be based upon obviously what they think or know appeals to the readership in that country. I know with The Drift, I was very keen that we had some similarities. So the font used is exactly the same on both the covers. And they're kind of like, whereas the UK is kind of red and black and the US is kind of white and red. And they work really well together. So they've got a similarity. Because we did have one situation with my second book, which was called The Taking of Annie Thorne in the UK, and it had a completely different title in the US. And that was a bit of a problem because a lot of people ended up sort of saying, "Oh, I bought your book, the Taking of Annie Thorne. I bought your book, The Hiding Place, and it's exactly the same book as this one." I'm like, "Oh, I know, they're different titles," and it was really frustrating. So I've always said, "Please, can we try and keep the same title?" But yeah, the cover thing I find interesting. But I loved the US one for A Sliver of Darkness, and I really loved the UK one as well. They were both, I thought, really cool covers. So generally, yeah, it's nice you get two really cool covers, but occasionally you go back and forth a bit. When I was first published, when you're first published, you're very scared to say anything about anything, obviously, because you're just so grateful that someone's publishing you. And people are like, "What do you think of this? Your guy's amazing. I love it. Thank you so much." And I think then as you go on, you do realize, well, it is my name on the cover and it is my book inside, and you try to have a little bit more input. But then I also go, well, I know nothing about nothing still, even after sort of 6 years. And so, I am always happy to be told what, people think will work better. But I do sort of express more of I like this, or I'm not so keen on this thing sometimes. But it's good to have a little bit of input. And sometimes, you can be productive or helpful. I don't know. I'm sure probably that people just sit there and go, "Oh God, we should go away and shut up." But
No, please don't. That would be bad if guests didn't talk.
Well, not here, but I think I always worry that my publisher, "Oh God, yes, we just do something to make it happy and go away."
Real quick, I just want to mention, I think it's really neat. Your first book was for Valentine, and then have you been with Penguin Random House for all your books?
Yeah.
And this is, I like to throw out little things there for like newer writers or whatnot, because we get quite a few of them. So I know you guys know this, but Penguin Random House is arguably the biggest powerhouse in the world for the writing industry. I mean, their imprints, I don't even know how many they have at this point. Because like as a writer myself, I don't know how else to word this besides sounding like a dork, but like how cool is that to have your books published through Valentine Books and Random House Group? I gotta imagine it's a good feeling.
It's bonkers, and it is such an odd one, isn't it? Because it took me, like most authors, it took me a long time to get published. I mean, I didn't start even trying seriously till my sort of 30s. So I was a big non-finisher of books. It took me a long while to get around to finishing stuff, and then it took me well over 10 years to publish The Chalk Man. I was 46 when The Chalk Man was published, so it was a long time, and it was amazing. Yeah, it was. I pretty much almost got to the giving up stage of thinking it would never happen when The Chalk Man sort of struck gold for me, I guess, really. And I was very, very lucky. And people always say, "Well, don't say you're lucky." You get people get published or get publishing deals because they're good or they're talented. And she said, no, there is a great deal of luck involved, because there's a huge amount of talented, great creative writers who haven't got publishing deals. And a publisher once said to me, you know, it's not to do with lack of talent that people don't get a publishing deal or get an agent. You know, they said, I turn down great books all the time, you know, because perhaps they don't fit our imprint. I've got another author that's too similar. It's just not the thing that is going to be successful, or we think is going to be successful at that moment in time. There's a great amount of luck and timing in it. And I feel hugely fortunate that when the Chalk Man, I got an agent for that. When that was submitted, the timing was right. And yeah, I still pinch myself a lot of the time. It is a weird thing. I'm you know, we're so fortunate. We're over in New York at the moment. And I'm going to see, you know, my US publishers tomorrow. And the first time I came over in 2018 to see them, and the first time I went to my UK publishers, walking into the building was like, I can't believe I'm here. This is just like so cool. But also, I'm sure security's going to throw me out any second. Yeah, I just like this child grinning, really. It's like, this is just so cool. It's an amazing thing. And it's a huge amount of dreams come true. And I never, ever, ever take it for granted. At the same time, when I write, I always try to put it out of my head, because I think if you think too much about who you're writing for, or whether you're trying to please your publishers or readers or anything other than what, you know, concentrating on what you think is a great idea, then I think you are letting yourself down. You kind of got to write without thinking about that. You got to kind of go, this is I love this idea. I want to write this book. Because otherwise, I think you might overthink everything, and everything you do, you'd be like, what do my publishers want? Or they liked this book, should I write the same thing again? Or and then you're starting to not write from the heart anymore. And so I never kind of want to do that. But at the same point, I'm very, very conscious that I would like to keep being published, because I love writing books and it's amazing. So it's a weird balance. But it is amazing, and I never lose sight of that. And I always think, you know, I feel incredibly lucky and privileged to kind of get to do it for a living. It was a long time coming, and you know, I love being able to do it.
It's amazing. Go ahead, Erica.
Oh, okay. Going back to your short story collection, I was just curious, does writing short stories, does that seem harder to you than writing the full-length novel, or vice versa?
I think it's vice versa. I love short stories. I love reading short stories. That's why I read first off, I think, when I was a kid. I used to read a lot of short ghost stories and things. And I read a lot of Stephen King, and of course he's written a load of short stories. And I love a short story. There's something really satisfying about a great short story. Because, you know, most novels, even my favorite novels, certainly probably my novels, I'm sure, are flawed in a way. Almost every novel is. I think it's impossible to write, I think, a perfect novel because of the length and everything. I don't know, but I think you can write a perfect short story. Some of my favorite stories are like a short stories, like things like The Monkey's Paw is just such a perfect story. There's an art to creating that perfect, like, tiny story. And I think it focuses the mind so much, because it focuses it, but you can also be more wild in a short story, because you haven't got to worry so much about making something span an entire 400 pages, or character arcs or subplots or any of that. You can just concentrate on this one story, and it can be as outlandish as you like, I think. So there's something very satisfying about it. And I've always loved writing short stories. I think, you know, it was a great palette cleanser in a way between sort of working on novels sometimes. So some of the ones in the collection I wrote a long time ago, and a lot of them I wrote specifically for the collection. It was about half and half. And I had a great amount of fun doing all of them. And I'd like to do another one, really, because I do think, you know, writing short stories, I do love doing it, that you just have such a lot of fun with them, because you can just have this idea, like I said, the cable car idea could have just been a short story. You don't have to worry about expanding it into a novel with all the things that encompasses. It can just be that, you know, that one crazy idea that you can write, like at the start of the End of the Liner, about the kind of the post-apocalyptic cruise. I've got a lot of end of the world stuff on my mind recently. I don't know why. But that came from being on this like Disney cruise we went on, and this idea that how cool it was. I mean, I thought it was amazing, but my God, how weird! You know, how also there's something quite sinister about constant happiness and people dressed up in big furry animal costumes. I mean, anyone's seen Donnie Darko knows how incredibly sinister that can be. And the idea that what's again what can be happy can be so sinister at the same time. And what if you were trapped there forever? And this that idea became this kind of crazy short story that I absolutely loved writing. So yeah, I like the fact you can just have these weird ideas and then you can just write them in a short story. And you can't always do that in a novel, but you can let the real crazy stuff out in short stories.
Where'd you go for the Disney tour? I could have taken that in so many directions, but I just want to know, and I ask because my wife and I talked about, we saw this one, I think it was to Alaska.
Oh wow, that'd be amazing, because we're hoping to go to Alaska actually. This one was just after the pandemic, so I think they had a lot of the tour ships kind of like stuck in the UK. So they were doing these like stay-at-home tours. So they basically never left British waters. They just took the boats out for 4 days, and they just basically went around in circles. But it was great. It was great fun, and we took our daughter on it. And she thought it was amazing because it was Disney, and of course she loves all things Disney. And I'm a sucker for Disney. You know, despite all the dark stuff, I'm an absolute sucker for it. We went to Florida actually last year, and I just embraced the whole thing, while maintaining this idea that there's definitely something slightly sinister about it all. But but the cruise was brilliant. But
That's fun.
Amazing. But imagine being stuck there for like ever.
No.
And ever.
You know. We're going, me, my wife, and son are going in a couple months, and I know he's not gonna remember it, but we'll have pictures. And
how old is he?
He's 3, and we're going to Animal Kingdom. We've been watching this show on Disney Plus that is, I forget the name of it, but they show behind the scenes of the safari, like all the Animal Kingdom stuff and how they take care of animals and how they really treat them like phenomenally. They know everything, and that makes it even more exciting to go. And then I'll be like, "Hey Phil, look, we're gonna be going on that." And he's like, "Animals."
Oh, Betty was 3.5. We took her to the Disney in Paris actually the first time. And you know what? It's kind of not for them in a way. I mean, she loved it at the time.
Yeah.
We loved seeing her reaction to everything. You know, and now she can't remember it. She's 9.5. She doesn't remember it at all. But it was kind of for us, but it was still, just amazing because to see a little face. Like, oh.
Question I like to ask parents that are writers who have kids is, how am I going to word this? So I asked this thinking of selfishly how I kind of am a parent, but do you think that as a writer that you're doing a job, because that's all I wanted to be growing up. And luckily I had a good support system in my family that they didn't say that's not real or whatever. But there's a lot of people that have that. So especially for those that may hear this, how's it feel to be a parent showing, not just saying, but showing your little girl, hey, I'm doing what makes me happy and I'm getting paid and people want to read it around the world. Like, how does that feel for you as the mom? Or have you ever even thought of that before?
It's weird because she doesn't remember. Betty was about 3 when I got my publishing deal. So she doesn't remember the time before I was doing this. And before I was doing this was very different. You know, money was tight. I was working as a dog walker, doing a little bit of script writing and various freelance writing jobs on the side. And she doesn't remember sort of that part of life. And things were much more difficult then. You know, they weren't awful, but money was definitely pretty tight. And, you know, we were juggling a lot more stuff. And now, she just remembers mummy being a writer. And life, became easier after then. But I think she kind of takes it for granted in a way because it's what she just always knows. But I hope that as she gets older, she'll realize, as you say, that, I get to do something, I love. And, it's enabled us to sort of, do certain things we can do now. And I hope she takes the idea that, we always say to her, she can do whatever she wants to. I always would just encourage her to do what she loves. Whether that's doing, I don't care whether she now ends up traveling, working in a bar, whether as long as she's doing something that makes her happy. I don't want her to be ambitious and chase money, if that makes sense. Because when I had so many jobs, over the course of the years, and I could never settle. I never had a proper career. I was always working freelance. I never had very much money, but I was never somebody who was settled down to a career. That wasn't me. I always wanted to work for myself. And if that meant that, there was less money and things were a bit tougher on that front sometimes, I always rather had that freedom. I'm not good at being a corporate sort of person working in a company. It wasn't me. And she may be different to that. Who knows? She's really creative, and she's really into like tech stuff as well. I think they all are these days, but she's really interested in how stuff works and all of those type of things, and filming stuff and videos. And at the same point, she's really creative. She loves drama. She loves designing things and drawing and art and stuff. So I hope, she'll go into something that she loves on that front. And we try and encourage her to do whatever she wants to do. It's a weird one because my parents, I loved writing, but they came from quite a traditional background. So they were very much like, I wouldn't say they discouraged me, but I think from my background, the idea that you could be an author and that would be a job you could do for a living wasn't something. It was like, well, that's nice. That's kind of what like very middle class people who live in London do, who've been to university. I left school at 16. Whereas it was like, we'll do something to do with writing that can actually be a proper job and earn you some money. And hence I ended up sort of doing copywriting and that type of thing, and stuff that was to do with writing, but was a job that would pay the bills. I think our parents were very much about security, you just have security. And while that's what I want for Betty, I also kind of would like her to be someone who goes, bye mum, I'm going off and I'm going to work my way around the world, see ya. So it's a tricky one, but I hope we sort of encourage her to do, what she loves. Mainly what she says to us at the moment is like, when she goes off to school, it's like, why do I have to go to school? Because you two can stay at home. And it's like, yeah, but we're working at home, It's not like we're sat around. Well, I mean, there's a lot of coffee making and, perhaps going on Twitter and stuff, but we are still working. So yeah, I think that's what she'll grow up with, going, my mum and dad, they just stayed at home.
That's awesome. Last thing, and then Erica, throw it back to you, and then Candace. So Keith Lansdale and Casey Lansdale, Joe Lansdale's kids, I asked them when they were first on what it's like to have, and I'm sure they're asked this a lot, just like Stephen King's kids probably were asked or are asked this a lot, but it's like, what's it like having Joe as your dad? And basically they said they went to a lot of conventions, and they're like, that's how we were raised. So
Yeah,
I got a feeling like your daughter's probably gonna kind of say the same thing based on what you were just saying. That's what it reminded me of. Like, that's all she knows.
it is. And it's like, that's what sort of mum does. And she's desperately kind of uninterested in it, really. I think she'd think I was much cooler if I was like a YouTuber or something, because these are her idols, like YouTubers and gamers, basically. She's very into gaming and things like that. So it's just something that's done, and occasionally she thinks it's relatively cool, but most of she's really impressed because one of the books is being made into a TV series, so she's interested in that. We went to the set a couple of times.
It's so cool.
So she found that was sort of quite cool, and the idea that might sort of be on television. So that was quite impressive. For a bit, she came to the set for a bit, and she thought some of it was really cool, and then she watched them film the same scene about 15 times from different angles, and very rapidly got bored. So, but I think at 9.5, it's like, I think whatever your parents do, she's getting to that age that whatever we do now, we're probably really uncool. We were coming up, coming to immigration, like we flew over the other day. And we had to go through security. So we're at the, and whenever you come through to like JFK, security is always quite scary, and they can be quite harsh.
That's New York.
This is it. And he's
some of them are dicks.
Yeah, he's looking at our passports and stuff. And he was quite friendly, actually, to be fair. And then he looked at me in Betty's passport, and he was like going, I can see, you've got your mum's, sort of little mini me there, got your nose and chin and stuff. And she just looked at me and she went, sad times. And he just was like, savage. And then, bless him, he just cracked up. It was like, yeah, this is the stage where she just thinks anything, her parents just desperately uncool, anything to do with us is uncool. So this has become our thing now. Anytime everything is just like sad times.
That's hilarious. Erica, take it away.
They're harsh at that age.
Yeah, I realize that I only got another year or two where I'm the funniest person in the world to my son. So I'll try to take that for granted.
Take comfort from that now. It all goes downhill.
Oh no.
Sad times.
I love
Yeah,
that
my idea of being cool is just out the window.
I'm sure it'll be back soon. I remember when I hit that age, I was not the nicest person, especially to like my brother and my mom. And I heard all the time that I looked like my dad. And I was like, do you not understand that's not a compliment? Like, I'm jealous that she looks like you because I wish I looked like my mom a little bit more. But here we are.
I can't imagine that you weren't like, I tell Tara all the time, you're literally one of the nicest people I've ever met. Can't imagine you're not nice.
Oh, my brother and I hated each other when we were little. I shouldn't say hated.
Siblings.
Like, it was fine. We had our moments. We definitely hung out a lot, but like it was the typical sibling where like you're sitting on different edges of the couch, and if you get too far into that middle cushion, it's a kicking fight, and someone's getting booted. And yeah, siblings are fun. I do have one other question for you, and then I think that sums up the questions on my end. But you've noted that all of your books take place in the same universe. And I know there's one character, and I don't know if I should share her name because if people haven't put that together, I don't want to spoil it. But there's one character that has made a couple of appearances in different books. So because your books are all in the same universe, do you put Easter eggs in that readers maybe haven't caught on? You do.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, definitely. There are. If you read them all, particularly if you read them in sequence, there are definitely references in all of the books. Even the Drift, there's a little reference in there at one point. So they do in my head kind of all exist in the same universe, because then I think it's quite fun then that you could potentially bring in other characters later down the line and stuff. And there is a character that makes an appearance as well in a couple of books. And I think it's quite nice to kind of like have this idea that there's this sort of other universe. That they're not going to be in our universe, or like an alternate universe where these characters all exist. And it's interesting because even though they're all very different, there's even something in the Drift. Even though like someone said, "Is this the same as the other books?" It's very different. I said, "Well, yeah, but it's slightly in the future, so it could, yeah, definitely potentially be in the same universe." And then I'm writing another book now. Now that's interesting because the book I'm writing at the moment is probably the only one that I would say perhaps does not exist in the same universe as the other books. It's slightly different. And I don't think it could exist in the same universe as the other books. So it's the first one that's definitely apart from that other universe, which again is fine, I think, as well, because you can't, I think you've always got to give yourself the freedom to do something different. So all the other ones definitely, I think, are kind of in the same universe, but the new one is definitely an outlier. Outlier? I never know which way around you say that as a writer.
I've heard outlier, but
is it outlier? I always say things wrong. I'm terrible for it. As a writer, I'm incredibly illiterate. But I was terrible. This is what happens from leaving school at 16 and being a self-taught writer. I said something the other day. I said, you know, the dots. They went, "You mean ellipses?" And I went, "Yeah, whatever they're called. Yeah, those."
That's actually, you've mentioned that before, like dropped up, but like that's super impressive and admirable. Like you made a career out of writing. You made a career out of something that's fundamental, that's not easy to grasp. You put words together into novels like that.
But I say the technical stuff. I you know, when people talk about grammar and stuff, I'm like, everything I've learned from writing. So I don't always know the right terms for things.
I don't either.
I've gut reaction. I know how I know it fits together and how it should be. But if people talk about technical terms with writing and grammar, sometimes I'm just like, yeah, okay. It just feels kind of right, so I gotta go with it.
I throughout my whole life have had a learning disability, and I don't remember a lot through school, so I'm right there with you. But like, I'm serious. That's really impressive.
I don't think you need to, in a way. I think you can make it too technical, and I think, you know, writing is kind of a gut thing, and you know, the technical stuff you can. I always think, you know, you've got loads of tools you can use to help with that.
And editors, you can get a good editor for that.
And I wouldn't say, my grammar is terrible and stuff, but there's still things I get wrong. But then there's other stuff that, I have a copy editor. And she's very good. She has an obsession with putting had into my things. It's something to do with past tenses and stuff. And I sometimes just go, no, it makes it too wordy. Just leave it out. People know what I'm talking about. I think she hates me. But then this is the same person who once made me change converse to converses. And I took great pleasure in saying, no, 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 no.
The sneaker,
They're
right?
not always right.
You're talking about Converse sneakers?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So it was
there you
the plural. And she wanted me to write converses.
Nikes. Erica, I really interrupted.
No, that
I
was
completely
it.
went off track. I forgot we were talking about to start with.
No, that was perfect. I was just talking about like the Easter eggs in your books. So
But
you
then,
guys,
when I say the new book it's definitely it is in its own universe, and it necessarily has to be. And it's probably the only book that even as I'm writing at the moment, I'm thinking I could potentially do a sequel to this book, but probably not straight away. So, which is interesting. Again, it's fun. It's
Damn. I'm gonna not say that would spoil it. But yeah, you could in a few different ways. Erica, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I don't think you answered this, and if you did, forgive me for asking, but you clearly are a fan of CJ. What's your favorite book by her?
Oh no.
it's just like
put you on the
choosing
spot.
your favorite child, which is easy if you only got you one.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I haven't yet read The Burning Girls. I really wanted to read that before we recorded, but didn't have enough time. Like you said, The Chalk Man holds a very special place because that was the first experience I had reading the work. But I think my favorite is The Drift, just because you went really dark and I loved it.
The Whistlers was so cool. It reminded me of parts of part 1 of The Stand, Stephen King's The Stand, where you're exploring this world and just seeing the aftermath of it. But then you also added like a kind of like a second-class citizen sort of deal of a crumbling world, which was really neat. You didn't go too much into it. Obviously, you couldn't with what was happening, but boy, would I be interested to see if you explored that one day. It was.
I had a lot of fun with it, and I wanted to just do just enough. And it's interesting. I'd like to revisit it at some point. And I say the book I'm writing now, I think I could sort of do a carry on from. It'll be interesting. I mean, the Drift has been optioned by the same production company that have made The Burning Girls, which is, I think, coming to TV this year. And it'd be interesting if anything did happen with that, if they wanted to take the story further, because I have ideas about directions it could go in. And again, I wouldn't want it to be too typical, though. I want to avoid some stereotypes on that as well. So it's interesting. It's interesting. It's interesting to keep things interesting, I think, because I think there are directions you can go in with this type of book, and I'd always like to hopefully defy expectations and not go in a predictable way.
You didn't write it in a way that I've read before, in the sense of like, it's not, tell me if I'm spoiling anything, but you're not doing it like 28 Days Later. It's not like George Romero's Walking Dead zombies, but you did it in a way that like they're the closest to where you can make a case they are still human. They're just not us. And that's where I think it's very unique. And that's why I would want to, as a reader, as someone that likes your books, that's why I would want to see where you took it. Or if it was like, if a studio did take it and that was your sequel, like a television show, that'd be cool too. I don't know. I would be really curious how you take that, Whistlers, because I work in an area where there's some creepy spots. Like I work at in an industrial job, wastewater treatment, and thank you for putting that in my head. I read another UK author, Rich Hawken. I think he's indie. I don't know if you guys know, but he wrote some books about something similar to this, and I don't like going alone after I read something like that in certain buildings. Candace, do you have any final questions for CJ?
I do. I have one. I think this might be a nice way to kind of wrap up, I guess. So can you walk us through what your writing rituals are, if you have any?
I'm not someone that kind of sticks really tightly to sort of rituals or anything. I don't even like have a word count. I know some authors are very disciplined on that front. They have to have certain things in place. I think because when I started writing, I very much used to like try and write whenever I could around whatever else I was doing. And Betty would have been about like sort of, 2 at the time. And so writing was like grabbed time when I could. And I still therefore can pretty much write wherever. I don't have to have any sort of thing in place. And I think that's quite good as well. So, I like to write in the morning. That's about the only thing. I'm much fresher. I'd rather get up early and write than write late at night. And some authors are the complete opposite. But I'm kind of done by about mid-afternoon. And I might edit a little bit in the evening, but I'm not at my creative best at night time. So being up sort of in decent time to get some writing done, I like to sort of start off in the morning. But I'm not, I think perhaps maybe because I've just got older and more chilled about stuff, I know that life gets in the way. So, I don't go, oh my God, I must write 2,000 or 3,000 words today, because I know if I set myself up to do that, something will happen. Something will happen with Betty, or, my mum's older now, so I have to sort of help with her quite a lot. Something will interrupt my day that will just throw everything into disarray. And then if I've set myself up to do something and I fail, it's like I've let myself down. So best not to, best just to go, if I get, X amount done today, that's great. But I'm not going to beat myself up if I don't, because, I'll have good days writing and bad days writing. And one day I'll write 4,000 words. And another day I will sit there rewriting the same paragraph for 4 hours. So I think I know it's very much a job, and you do have to treat it like that. It is a job. And you have to sort of, get those words on the page. But I'm relatively sort of flexible with how I do that. I don't have to have a certain way of sitting and doing stuff. As long as I've got my laptop, or I can get to my desk and write, then I'm good. Really, I'm good to go. I think you can make too much of it. Some people are like, I must go and I light a candle and go and sit and retreat and shut the door and all this. Normally I'm
Some people do.
It's sat in scrubby, dirty clothes,
Yeah.
cup of tea and biscuits, and the dog's doing something and Neil's making noise somewhere else, and if Betty's home every 15 minutes, mommy. So that is, that's life, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So just to add to that too, I find this one to be an interesting one as well. Do you ever write with music on? I personally can't, but I know a lot of my author friends, they write to like movie soundtracks, and they're making these playlists now to go with the book that they wrote, because they're like, here, this is what I listened to when I was writing this, to kind of like set the mood, which is cool and all, but I find that I need like as much peace and quiet as I can. So do you ever write with music or no?
No. I love music. I love playing, music in my car when I'm driving around. We bought a record player recently, started rebuying vinyl again, which was brilliant.
Nice.
And we always put music on in the evening, have some chill time. We go downstairs and we stick some music on. And Betty's a big music fan as well. She's a big rock chick already. Big fan of Foo Fighters, Frank Carter, Frank Turner. She's as well as some sort of, but we're trying to get her into all the cool rock stuff. So yeah, she loves music. We love playing music. While I'm writing, no, I find it too distracting, because I listen to music when I run, which I love, but I like to listen to the music, and I can't do that and write. I find it too distracting to have the things happening at the same time.
Yeah,
it's funny, isn't it? I like to have quiet as much as I can. I like to have quiet.
Yeah, same. Okay.
We're gonna dive into what are you currently reading, CJ? What are you currently reading?
I'm not reading anything at the moment because I'm writing, so I'm not certainly not reading any fiction at the moment, because I find it a little bit distracting. So I sort of dip in and out of other stuff. So I'm reading a book of a sort of a satirist's book at the moment about the government in the UK, and there's a lot to do satire about. It's actually probably beyond satire at the moment, but so I'm reading that because I don't really like reading fiction when I'm writing a new book. The last book I read that was fiction, and I really enjoyed was a book called, and I keep bringing this one up because I loved it so much. It's called Sign Here by Claudia Lux. And if you guys know it, I like books that don't fit into a particular genre. And this one is kind of like a mixture of horror and slight fantasy and mystery and thriller. And it's about a deal break, a guy who does deals in hell, and for people's souls essentially. And if he gets the soul of one more family member of this quite prestigious family, then he can earn himself a big promotion to get out of hell. But it doesn't run to plan. And it's kind of a mystery about this family, about sort of the secrets this family have, and about kind of how hell works. And it's also very funny, but really brutal. And it's a great book because it mixes so many genres. It reminds me very much of early Michael Marshall Smith, actually. And I really, really enjoyed it. My next book I've got lined up to read is The House in the Pines, which is Anna. I can see it over there. Anna Ray's. Is it Anna Ray's? It is, isn't it? The House in the Pines, which I think is quite a creepy, dark sort of mystery. I mean, I get a lot of proofs as well. So I've got a sort of pile of proofs that I must get round to reading, and I always feel incredibly guilty because I'm not reading fast enough. But I am very, very slow these days. I used to just read so quickly, and now I'm much slower because I can only read certain things at certain times. Because, as I say, when I'm writing, I don't like to read anything similar. So sort of, while I'm writing, genre-wise, so I tend to read non-fiction, and then once I've finished a book, then there's this lovely little gap in between the book and editing where I am starting to write a new book, but I'm not quite into it. So I kind of hopefully then have some gaps to kind of catch up on reading. But then we're doing some more traveling, again, at the moment. So hopefully I'm going to catch up on some more reading then. But I feel terribly guilty that I just don't read as much as I used to.
I know quite a few writers actually don't read when they're deep into a book.
Yeah, I think it's funny, it can be distracting, and it's easy to pick up on things from other books sometimes. I still like to keep that kind of clear head and then sort of have a bit of a binge when we go on holiday.
Is there a book from someone that you maybe want to throw out there? I know you already did with Claudia. I'm just wondering if there's maybe one or two more. If not, that's fine. We'll move on.
I always try and think what books, because interesting, some books obviously are out in the UK and they're not out in the US. I read another really good book. I don't know if this one's going to be published in the US, called End of Story by a writer called Louise Swanson, who also publishes under the name Louise Beach. But it's quite it's a really interesting book. It kind of reads like sort of dystopian fiction set in a future where fiction has been banned, essentially. But there's kind of like there are these people who read sort of bedtime stories to kids, which is kind of illegal. But they have kind of these illegal phone lines.
Oh, I love that.
And this woman becomes involved with reading to this child, but it's not all it seems. And very quickly you realize there's something else going on. It's a really, really good book, and very interesting. And I found it really affecting. It's nothing is quite what it seems in this book. You don't really know what's the real story and what isn't. And that was very, very good. I don't know if that's publishing in the US. I think it publishes in the UK in May this year. That was very, very good indeed. And I'm trying to think of anything else I've read recently that I could recommend that's coming out soon. I said my reading's been quite sporadic, and often the problem is that I read stuff that isn't out yet. So like, I read this, and I don't know when it's out. It might be out next year. So I'm trying to think of a few more books that I've read that I thoroughly recommend. Other books that I read recently, well, not so recently. I'm a big fan of Stu Turton, who wrote Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle and The Devil and the Dark Water. I know that one's been out in the US. Again, he writes books that are really kind of genre defying in a way as well. So I think basically The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle was basically Agatha Christie meets Quantum Leap. It was a really brilliant book. And The Devil and the Dark Water, it's kind of like almost a Sherlock Holmes take. It's sort of historical, it's partly mystery, it's kind of got a Sherlock Holmes feel with this kind of investigator on this ship. He writes really interesting stuff as well. But I'm terrible. I'm terrible for recommending stuff because I can never remember stuff that I've read. And then quite often my reading's quite haphazard. So I've read something that's actually quite old and there's something that isn't out yet. And
That's fun. That's really fun to do. It's not, you never get used to the same old.
but also I like mashups. I like things that don't fit a particular genre. So I love scary books, but I love mysteries. I love stuff that's a bit dystopian. Anything that isn't quite definable, I find really interesting.
Candace, what are you currently reading?
What am I currently reading? Wow, it's like 8 different books I'm currently reading right now. Let me look at my list here.
It's an awful question. I always find it's like you always go, what am I currently reading? Oh my goodness, what have I read? What have I read
There's
recently? What am I
so
going to
many.
be reading?
I'm actually reading a new one from Christy Aldridge, The Breaking of Mona Hill, which is really dark. Not quite about halfway through, but I'm enjoying it a lot. It'll be out, I think, in May. So, and I'm going to do a blurb on that one. So that is one of my ones I have to get through here in this next week or so. And then I'm also reading another one called Hungers as Old as This Land by Zachary Rosenberg, which is a Jewish horror Western. And I'm doing a blurb for that one as well. He's relatively new, but he's amazing. So those are my top 2 for right now. But yeah, I have a stack on my nightstand and I like 8 different ones I'm working my way through. And yeah. So
all right, you just make me feel lazy. I already said to you, I'll say it publicly. I don't know how you get so much done. Her writing,
a tight schedule.
No, man.
I know. I always find something has to give. This is
efficient.
I don't sleep.
Efficient as hell.
I don't sleep.
You were like one of the few people I don't feel bad to text early in the morning or late at night because you're up.
I'm up.
It's crazy. All
yeah,
right,
I sleep from like 1 in the morning until like 5, and then I'm up at 5 and I'm writing, man. I'm editing, I'm reading, I'm emailing, I'm scheduling, I'm reviewing. I run a website. I post reviews every week. I have a newsletter every other week. I do a lot of mentoring of newer authors and other authors, and I'm always like on the phone answering questions and just helping out. Patrick can attest to this. Like, you can pretty much reach me at any time, and I'm usually helping somebody. And yeah, I do a lot, and I also have a day job. So like I keep a very tight schedule, and then like every hour of my day is just like scheduled out. And yeah, I don't sleep, but it's fun.
Wow. No, making me feel tired. I mean, I'm tired.
Right?
I have 10:30 at night. I'm like 10:30, 11 o'clock generally. I'm in bed. I'm late up already now.
Yeah, we're definitely wrapping it up. Definitely wrapping it up. We're all tired. I don't know if Candace is. She doesn't seem like she's tired.
No, she's got hours.
Erica, what are you currently reading?
Oh my gosh, well, Candace made me yawn just talking about all that. Sorry. I don't know how you do it either. I'm not currently reading anything because I just finished The Drift yesterday. But the next, oh gosh, my computer screen's in front of me turned off. I was like, did I just lose you guys? But we're good. The next book I'm reading is Churn the Soil by Steve Stredd. Really excited about this one. He sent me a signed copy, so really antsy to get into that. But then I had one other just kind of side recommendation, because CJ, you keep saying you like stuff that doesn't fit into a certain genre. I wouldn't say this one necessarily has a ton of horror, but there's definitely mystery. And this is the single book that I have no idea what genre it is, because it's all over the place. But it's The Limpet Syndrome by Toni Moyle.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I haven't heard of that one. Okay.
Yeah, it's actually part of a trilogy. But this one, if you just read this one, it also stands really well on its own.
Okay.
But He
I
sent
love
that to me when I
that.
first started book blogging and gave me a chance to read and review his book. So holds a special place for me. But yeah, to this day, I have no idea what genre it is. And it's
Excellent.
funny,
Okay,
it's
I'll look into that.
mysterious. It's
Olympia
yeah.
syndrome. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
I just want to mention that because I've talked about it on Twitter. For all those that want to know what Candace writes, this is one book that's getting a lot of praise. It's called Bishop. It's by Candace Noah.
Ooh,
That
that looks gory.
Yeah.
That looks dark.
Yeah, Candace, I know you weren't looking for this, but tell us real quick, what is it about?
What is it about? It is a unusual take on Native American shapeshifter lore. It is a bit of a survival story, a mix of folklore, winter creature feature mix. Essentially, a young woman and her mom go on an extreme adventure. They want to go and do this hike. It's up in Alaska, which is very near to where they live. And they go and they spend a week to go camping, and a blizzard takes place unexpectedly because it is very near to spring. But in Alaska, the thaw is very unpredictable, so you don't know. So of course, things don't go according to plan, and they get sort of stuck. They don't come in when they're supposed to. Their uncle comes up. He's very determined to try to help find them, rescue them. He's not the type that can just sit and wait. So he's like, I need to go, I need to go, I need to go. And some of the locals clue him in about a loner type of man who knows the woods inside and out. And they're like, this is the man you want if you want to have any hope of trying to find them, which is the name of the book, Bishop. And he eventually meets up with Troy and helps him along the way, but things unravel quickly, and Bishop is hiding a secret of his own, as well as the Alaskan wilderness also is hiding something very old and very evil. So it turns into sort of an all-out race against time, not only between what is in the woods, but the weather, the elements, everything is just a real crush of, are they going to get there? Are they going to make it? And what is this man hiding? Yeah, so it's fast-paced, tense. Yeah.
And I didn't plan on this, but I just
But
realized
they match.
They match. They
do match.
do.
And
I
they're
love
similar.
the sounds of it.
and they're similar in strictly in the sense of like a winter horror or whatever.
Mhm.
Definitely.
I am currently reading Victor Laval. I hate this. It's like a mirror thing, so I have to do the opposite. Victor Laval's Lone Women. It's about it takes place in 1915, and it's about homesteaders, these people that got this property if they could like maintain it in Montana, and it's not just white women, it's mainly women, it's Black women, China, Asian women, just a lot of stories that you typically don't hear about when you think of the Old West. I personally love that. Like, I like Westerns, but like I like the stories you don't usually think of. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna shit all over cowboys and gunslingers, but like we've seen, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. We've seen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm promising you guys, I didn't mean to do this either, but I'm going here because I'm talking about this. But I edited an anthology that's coming out probably this summer. I don't have a date yet, but it's a weird Western, and I did the slush reading, and the majority of the men all wrote the same shit. There's an exception,
Right.
like Wally Young. For those that know him, he writes a hell of a tale. He did a great job. There was maybe one or two others, but for the most part, with the women, they were original. They were just well done, and I want to. Ever since then, especially ever since then, I want to read more takes on things that I normally wouldn't think. No, I don't know how to say this without sounding like a complete moron. I want to see things that normally women you don't think of writing. Obviously, they do, but things that I'm not familiar with, like Westerns. I'm just very fascinated by it, especially after that slush reading period. So yeah, it fits in with Little Women because it's just nothing that I even knew was a thing. Like Montana was established by all these women that were badasses. So
right.
Yeah, Victor's awesome. He's such a good writer.
Mhm.
I'm also reading The Changeling. Well, I'm listening to the audiobook of that, and he does the narration, and that's a tricky one for an author to do their own fiction.
Yeah.
He does a really good job.
Yeah, I couldn't read my own stuff. No.
I'd be too nervous.
I think I think it's one of those things that a lot of authors think they can, but very few can do it well and convincingly. It's a real talent to do an audiobook. So yeah, hats off to anybody who can.
Yeah, absolutely. CJ, where can people follow you?
They can follow me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter quite a lot. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm kind of fairly obvious to find at CJ Tudor or CJ Tudor Author. I think CJ Tudor Official on Facebook, CJ Tudor Author on Instagram, and just at CJ Tudor on Twitter. I've yet to master TikTok. I don't think I ever will. I tried. I posted 2 videos. And I went, this is all far too much hard work. Have people got the time to do this constantly?
Erica, where can people follow you?
And the best bet for me is just to go to my blog. It's ericarobinreads.com, and I've got a bunch of links that you can choose your favorite social media platform.
Candace, where can people follow you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and my website, uncomfortablydark.com.
Love that name. And you can follow me at PR McDonough. Just Google if you don't know how to spell that last name. It's fine. Really at I think it's just Instagram and Instagram and Twitter. But for the show, follow us on Dead Headspace. Bunch of platforms there. I am terrible at pitching our own show on the show. So final thoughts, CJ. Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts on books, life, everything.
Yeah, that's kind of aggressive, me and vague. Do you have any final thoughts in general?
No, never any final thoughts. Oh God, this has been really good. Actually, we've been covered such a lot of stuff. It's been really, really cool. So yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Final thoughts. Oh, crumbs. There I go. Crumbs again. You see?
I love that phrase so much.
That's my final thought. Crumbs. It's a new phrase.
I love it.
Comes from watching too much Danger Mouse. Do you get
Danger Mouse? I don't know what that is.
Look up Danger Mouse. It's brilliant.
There you go. Danger Mice. Erica, final thoughts or crumb thoughts?
Crumb is such a funny phrase because typically when I use the word crumb, it's either a literal we're making a mess, or when I really want to insult somebody. But that's what goes back to what Pat was saying. I can't insult someone and actually be mean. So I'm like, they're
too nice.
They don't matter. But yeah, my final thoughts, CJ, it was so nice to meet you. I could not believe it when Pat sent over the note that we were going to interview you. It's been so nervous.
Cool. It's so cool. Thank you very, very much for having me on. I'm sorry, a bit of confusion as well over whether it was today or tomorrow. I got very confused. I confuse myself because I constantly get dates wrong. So
Erica figured that out. It ended up being Zoom. It reflected your normal time zone, and I never even thought of that. I'm like, she's in New York.
Of course. I was here. Yeah. I mean, no way I'd be up at 2:00.
No. We would never do that.
Not anymore.
That's so. I would not ask that because I want to do that myself. That's too early. Candace, any final thoughts?
Other than I completely loved The Drift. The entire novel was just excellent.
Thank you so much.
And for Patrick and Erica and our missing co-host, Brennan, thank you for inviting me on as a guest host. I
Absolutely.
love it. So, yeah,
Well,
it's been fun.
since Brennan's not here, we have to have CJ back on sometime. But
Oh, come on, I can ask people questions instead. That'll be fun.
you know, I'm not blowing smoke up your honey, but like I really did. You were an author that I really did want to get on for a while.
Oh,
But
thank you.
yeah, I was like, okay, this is the universe telling me that now's the time when we heard from your rep. I'm like, okay, yeah, now's a good time.
It's been really good. It's been good fun.
It's been a blast, and I'm really gonna use Ochromes. I love that saying.
People give you strange looks. Yeah, what is he saying?
Yeah, I'm in the States, but whatever. But it's been a pleasure, and I really do hope people pick up the drift because it's a contemporary Christie.
Yay!
I know people don't like being compared to other authors, but like obviously it's your own unique style, but there's just such cool, like a tribute to like the grandmother of thrillers. And
Oh no, I'll take that. And you know, as long as it's a good comparison, I'll always take it.
Next episode is 186 with Victor Laval. We're going to cover Lone Women, his upcoming book that comes out March 21st, 2023. One day I'll get the camera right. And yeah, that's all I got for now. Everybody have made choices in podcasts. Thank you for picking us.